My name is Rhett Power. I am a Forbes contributor and head of Accountability Inc., which is an executive coaching firm. What we do is optimize leaders to perform their best. So it's a pleasure to be back here at Greek House to have this conversation about ESG. Now, one of the first things we're going to do in this panel is define what that means. And then we've got an amazing expert panel here to help you understand it better, to help you understand how it might apply to your business. And so I'm going to ask the panel to briefly introduce themselves, because if you ask me to introduce you, I will mess up every one of your names. So I will start here, sir.
Thank you very much. My name is Patrick Odier. I'm a banker. I've been banking in the banking industry for 40 years, especially involved in investing. And for about 30 of those 40 years, I've been investing sustainably with our firm and advising our clients to do so. I'm also chair of an initiative that we took about 3 years ago with the United Nations, which is called Building Bridges, and brings all actors involved into the sustainability transition together with the financial sector to see how this financial sector can accelerate the transition. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Cynthia Ortiz Toledo. I head Public and Regulatory Affairs at Coca-Cola Hellenic Bottling Company. As you can hear from our name, we have very good roots and heritage in Greece. We have been operational there since the 1950s. And despite we have expanded our footprint now to 29 countries across Europe and Africa, Greece is very close to us. Our subsidiary is Coca-Cola Trier Epsilon, and we are very happy to be here sharing our experiences in sustainability and how we can build bridges as well with other industry sectors, and of course learn from others' experiences of how we can achieve sustainability goals. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ricardo Lambiris. I'm the chairman of the Athens International Airport. I'm delighted to be here today. Prior to that, I was the CEO of the privatization agency, and prior to that, I was an investment banker for about 23 years.
Hi, my name is Dr. Christina Ram, and I am a scientist, and I am the chairman of the Root Brands and DRC Ventures. I'm a patent holder, and I do a lot of innovation which pertains to sustainability, working in 89 countries in my career.
So, as I said, talented, right? Talented people with a real understanding of this issue. But I want to give the audience a real understanding of this issue. What is ESG? I'd like you to define it from your perspective. It is a big topic. It is a broad topic. It means a lot of different things to a lot of different organizations. But how do you define a successful ESG strategy? What does that look like for your company, for you as a business owner? Or a business leader, can you define that for us?
Yes, I think it's an important question. Let me just perhaps start quickly by telling you how we approach sustainability and then how we define ESG. We approach sustainability as financial experts by defining our view of the world of tomorrow, i.e. we, of course, are all in the business of trying to understand what's the world today, but I think if you want to advise and allocate capital and deploy capital in a smart way, you have to understand where the world is going. So we start by that, and once we do that, we sort of interpret our view of the world of tomorrow in the different types of business activities that can be subject to investing. So it means that we're here in a mode of a transition. We are today here and we want to go there because we all recognize that our global economic model has reached some limits. Now, ESG has come into this picture as an initial concept to sort of facilitate the understanding of what are the criteria that are the ones to be understood in this definition of sustainability, environment, of course, social and governance. My view, my understanding of ESG is that we are way beyond that concept today. ESG has to do with a snapshot. It's like a picture you're doing about the situation of today of a company on all those criteria. And it is essentially geared towards understanding how a company or an economic actor is basically behaving. What we are interested in terms of sustainable investors is basically to understand what an economic actor is doing and not how. And in this respect, how long does it take to get to the objectives that have been set and agreed upon, in particular the ones that we're talking about here, the Sustainable Development Goals. So we are interested in transition. That's a film in which the companies and the economic actors will develop into a more sustainable sets of conditions versus the definition of ESG, which is basically a snapshot of what the firm, not what the firm, but how the firm is behaving today in its environment.
So for us, ESG is about really delivering on commitments. Sustainability for us and growing and delivering sustainably is key to what we do. And we make our business decisions through those lenses. We have a very clear roadmap into what we want to achieve in terms of sustainability, and we have delivered as well into what we bring as value to our communities where we operate, and also how we source sustainably and act sustainably in the countries where we operate. And we have also very clear targets on how to achieve our goals. One example would be our commitment and our ambition to achieve net zero by 2040. We have already succeeded in many, many commitments towards this. We have, for example, reduced our carbon emissions by scope 1 and 2 by 50% and 30% since 2010 across the 3 scopes, as an example. We have created many, many different initiatives as well through this journey that started already a long time ago. So for us, delivering on ESG is not something, and in sustainability is not something that is a new thing. We started with our first carbon reduction target since 2006, and by 2016 we were amongst the first 12 companies globally to have scientifically approved reduction targets. So we're very keen on delivering and very keen to going beyond the concept of ESGs. We have very concrete commitments and we're delivering on those, and I'm very happy to share a few more examples of how we are transitioning to that. Thank you.
So for me, ESG is the duty of our generation to deliver to the next generation a sustainable world, right? And I think that's what we are all trying to achieve here. In terms of the Athens International Airport, we have been committed to the environment since very early. We're actually one of the first airports to be on the ACI, the World Organization for Airports, where we built the ESG accreditation, the environmental accreditation, and we're one of the first airports to get it. By 2025, in our Route 2025 program, we expect to be net zero, and that's being achieved through a program with PV plants and batteries. So our first PV was done in 2008, and that was 8 megawatts. Then we built in the first quarter of 2023 another 16, and now we're tendering a project for 45 megawatts plus battery storage to take us to net zero. And then the next one is scope 3 emissions, which is one of the hardest to crack. Aviation as a whole is one of the, I'd say, industries which has been put in the spotlight. However, it actually contributes less than 3% of total greenhouse emissions. Airports, 5% of that 3%, which is 0.15%. Nevertheless, the whole industry is committed to becoming net zero by 2050. The problem is we have, unlike electric cars, for instance, which are easy plug-in, we have technological issues. You don't have long-haul flights with batteries. We're not going to have that. So until hydrogen comes over, I don't think there's an immediate solution. The in-between solution is sustainable aviation fuels, but there's a ramp-up scale and a question of cost. I'll stop there and allow my colleague to speak.
We started in 2015 with the different companies that I am involved in. My partners, Ted Baker and Clayton Thomas. I wrote a patent where we regenerate the land, air, and water. We looked at sustainability and we looked at how can we go a step further to get to net zero. To do that, we wanted to, while we were hitting sustainability factors, regenerate throughout the world. Going to 76 countries with different products has been very hard. We're working with different manufacturers throughout the world. And through this system, we're having to gauge basically what our other contributors are doing, because when you work in 76 countries, you're actually analyzing all your manufacturing and all your input and output. So to do that, we're holding certain standards and accountability throughout the different metrics that we have throughout the world. we have a lot to do. I want to be honest with everyone. Sustainability and the environment is really hard. It's a day-by-day approach, and you have to constantly make this a goal and part of your mission as a country, and as a company, excuse me. We start by saying that your environment is the most important part inside of you and then outside of you. So we work towards this every day. And when we go into a country, we look at this. We're getting ready to go into India, for example. So we're very concerned about the environment and sustainability and what we can do. We take a step-by-step approach with governments, and we try to analyze and work together for a collaboration so we can succeed in this areas. But it is a lot of work for a company that is a global company, and I'm sure you guys feel the same way.
Thank you for those answers. How important is the partnership between government and business in achieving sustainability goals? Is it really crucial? And I'll start down here, and we'll come back down this way. We'll reverse the order.
I think it's very hard, but governments are taking step-by-step approaches as well. It's in their mission. I think we're all working towards this. When you look at the pollution and what we're dealing with, and the fact that even the food that we're eating has been impacted by this, and the clothes that we're wearing are a factor in this as well. You have to bring this to the attention of the governments when you're working with them, but you also have to understand that each government has different challenges in their areas. We try to approach this by gradually implementing different plans when we go into the countries. I think it is important to work with each government and to understand what each country is dealing with, because even though this is a global issue, there's intricate issues that are involved in each area of the world. And so I do think it's important, but I also think our companies have had to be realistic and understand this isn't something we're going to solve overnight. We just have to work together. It has to be something we understand are going to impact our children and their children. So this is something you have to make as a top priority, but also understand it's not going to be fixed overnight.
Let me ask sort of an additional question for you guys all to comment on. Is it the role of private companies to lead here? I think because government, in my view, tends to sort of lag behind in the understanding of these issues, the importance of it, and they don't move fast. Companies tend to move faster, right? And yeah, please.
May I?
Yes, you can.
I'm happy with this question because one point that we have to realize, although there are risks and difficulties and complexity, we are facing the biggest, widest set of investment opportunities and development opportunities that we have ever lived for the last 50 years today. Why? Because this sustainability transformation is as profound, as deep as the Industrial Revolution and as fast as the digital revolution. It creates a necessity for the economic actor, not necessarily a role, a necessity for the financial actor to understand and transform their business model in order to make sure they benefit from it and not necessarily to have a role to better society or to reach goals per se. Now, of course, there's a combination of what the private sector can do and what the regulators and the governments can do. But in addition to that, there's a role that technology can do, and there's a role what consumer can do. So I think a capital here, in general, whether it's corporate capital invested in capex types of infrastructure, or whether it's financial capital, is only one of the four levers that needs to be acting effectively to make sure that this sustainability transition will happen.
If I can follow up on that, I really like your comments, and the question I think is critical, especially of what you are trying to do here in Davos as well, which is also building these partnerships and these connections. So we're all connected. I mean, the actions that one does impact the other. So we definitely need to have that clarity that we need to build partnerships from the public sector and the private sector. One element is, of course, as you were mentioning, and I fully echo that, the private sector has a role because we bring the capital, because we also bring the technical knowledge. The government, on the other side, they set the direction, the environment also to make the decisions where we can invest, where we can keep progressing as well. So the collaboration is essential to make it clear that actually can happen. I would like to share a small example from our industry of how this really comes together. We are really trying to create and investing heavily in creating these infrastructures as well that we can collect the materials that we put in the market. So We want to collect the bottles and cans that we put in the market, recover them, so when a bottle goes out, comes back, and we produce it again as a new bottle. So creating a full circularity. These deposit return schemes are moving very importantly across Europe. And Greece is one example, and we're very acknowledgeable of the government's efforts in trying to promote this policy. It's a very important effort to create circularity. The reason that it's critical to have this joint effort is because this comes from a legislation. So the government needs to set that legislative framework for it to happen. But to materialize it, you need also consumer behavior. The consumer needs to understand how to, once they have a bottle that is out, return it, and then create that circularity process. So that's where the private sector also comes in terms of supporting. We're closer to the consumers, we're helpful also to create these consumer behaviors. And once there is an understanding of both elements, this is just an example, we can really materialize that. And we can go ahead with many things that are happening towards innovation, artificial intelligence, climate resilience. There are many other ways that we can build partnerships, but I think communication, openness, and clarity on the objectives is key.
Thank you.
Well, I think governments are actually moving faster than they should on some aspects, and that's in terms of creating regulations and putting the weight to the private sector. So they're putting, it's sort of a carrot and stick approach, and they're sort of using the stick more than the carrot. And I take it that, private companies want to invest, and there is a benefit, and I fully agree with that. But that's in a world where all the world is aligned. So you have, for instance, leadership from Europe or the US in terms of sustainability, and then you have other countries which are sort of taking economic benefit from that. And aviation is one which, for instance, if we go through what Europe is planning, lots of non-European countries will benefit from flying around Europe and not through European airspace, and so on and so forth. So I think there needs to be a holistic approach, and I think everyone needs to be committed to this, right? And I think many governments have got it wrong. They haven't given enough incentives. I mean, private capital is going to flee away from industries that, are not, let's say, do not provide a return which they would expect. So, for instance, looking at what happened before COVID-19, before the pandemic, airports used to trade at significantly higher multiples than what roads traded. Now it's the other way around for many reasons, one of which, however, is also the sustainability context of this. So it's very important that incentives, carrots with sticks, are put in the right balance to make sure that private capital stays there and continues to invest in the industry. Otherwise, we're going to get, for instance, in aviation, we're going to have deteriorated infrastructure, we're going to have higher cost of travel, higher cost of cargo, and so on and so forth. So I think, the balance at the moment is not what it should be.
Christina.
I've already answered a little bit, but I'll say a little bit more. In the United States, we're working on a 500,000 square foot manufacturing plant with the government in South Carolina, and we are very concerned, obviously, about the sustainability. So we are coming to the table to build this in the state, but they are equally a partner, I think, in trying to develop manufacturing in the textile space, pharmaceutical space, nutraceutical, and skincare, because those are the areas that we're really, and animal health. Those are the areas that we really focus on in our companies. So we're very focused on it, and they are too. It takes a lot of additional planning and a lot of additional meetings. I will say in all the countries I've worked in, I think that the UAE is one of the best for really focusing as a government and governments on environmental sustainability. They have a lot of implementation that they require when you go in as a company, or if you manufacture, or even if you ship in and out. And I think it's a role model for a lot of the countries that we can follow. Of course, there's many other political arenas that focus on this, but I think that they've really done a fantastic job. I do think, though, it's our responsibility as businesswomen and men to do this and to lead this and to be a part of bringing this to countries where they aren't focusing on this and they need to focus a little bit more. It's our responsibility, because if we're going to grow, if we're going to bring economic health and wealth to these countries, at the same time, we need to make sure that we're focusing on, again, not just this generation, but the next generation and then further.
On that, if I may, just a comment. I fully agree with what you said. We do need to show leadership as Western countries, but we also need to put economic might behind it. So, for instance, let's take Africa. I mean, in the space of aviation, they're saying, guys, we're very happy to be on the sustainability front. We understand it and we want to do it. However, we need resources, we need technology. And we need to help. And on technology, it's a bit difficult because of what's happening in the world. In terms of resource, economic resources and packages, we definitely need to look into that.
Do you guys think? I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Two quick remarks on the government to private sector relationship. Sorry, I think what we have to make sure about is, one, that the private sector comes with proposals about how to articulate correctly sustainable investment conditions. And I think this is our duty, and that's precisely what, for instance, we do in our case with Building Bridges and also Swiss Sustainable Finance, which is an organization that regroups all the financial actor segments of this country to make sure that we as experts are setting the stage rather than let simply, I would say, experts from the government side to sort of do so. Why? Because as you can see today, there's an interesting trend, which is basically this trend of greenwashing. And greenwashing is even more dangerous, in my view, as the wrong sustainability, governmental or regulatory condition. Greenwashing means that the leaders, the ones that really want to progress and are taking steps in these directions, do not now dare even to introduce themselves as leader in this issue, or even to present themselves in this issue. They prefer to do without saying. I.e., I'm sure it's not the case for the airport, which is doing a lot, but there are sectors where you'd rather not speak about it because you know very well that it's extremely sensitive, and that's wrong. So I think the collaboration private-public sector has to do with encouraging, also from that angle, leaders from both aspects, public and private sector, to do it together. Second comment, on the public-private issue, I think you have to look at investments from the micro angle to it, i.e. companies and investments in industry, and then from the macro. Of course, if you look at the consequences of today's climate issues, they are not only on the micro side very effective and very important or damaging, but also on the macro side. You know, this whole discussion we had at the COP28 had to do with transferring masses of capital into vulnerable countries for very good reasons that I won't go over. To do that, you need government implication.
Right. So, go ahead.
Just a follow-up comment on this. I think one key element is also that the private sector brings the technical knowledge that is really, really imperative that the government takes into account. Previous to my corporate life, I used to work in governments and international organizations, and one thing that I spotted is, despite the very good intentions to do the best, they don't necessarily have the technical knowledge of what the legislation will look like in reality and in practice, and if it's actually feasible to do it. And you were mentioning many examples of, okay, the concept is great, but how are we going to make it practical? So I think one area is really an open dialogue, when they are really open to hear what are the practicalities of proposals, how can they be achieved, and also how much, when you were talking about investment, how much will actually need the terms of transition, the capex investment, everything that will be required to actually make it happen. And unless there's a close dialogue and an open dialogue and close collaboration to make this happen, there will be potentially flaws in any proposals that could happen. So it is critical that there is a good openness to discuss.
Great questions and really great answers and thoughtful answers. I want to shift gears a little bit and focus on the customer here for a minute. I know from my own experience in the United States and in Europe that the customer now has more leverage than they've ever had, right? We've got just how powerful social media is and influencers and people are making decisions on what they buy because of the company and who leads it and how they lead and the ethics of the company and their public positions on some of these issues. And we've seen a lot of corporates stand up when social issues come up and these big global issues come up, and they've made statements on it. And I grew up when I started my business. I remember this advice that my mother-in-law gave me, which was, and I come from a political background, but she said, never put your political sign out front. She said, never make a statement on controversial issues And she was a very successful business person, ran a very successful business. I don't think that's doable today. So all of us thrive on customers. We serve customers, and we are dependent on them for our businesses. How do we communicate what we're doing to our customers effectively, and what impact has that had on driving your businesses to be better, do better, lead in this way, and how critical is that for businesses today to really have that top of mind? And anybody can jump in, whoever wants to jump into that question.
I'll just start and say, because our business, our customers, we have people all over the world that take nutraceuticals, skincare, and everything is very important what they think, right? We started, one of the companies, the Root Brands, launched during the first month that COVID hit. It was hard to source, and looking at the environment and sustainability was even harder because everything was shut down. As a company, we use all natural sources. We rarely use preservatives. We don't add additives, but even the packaging is a major issue. When you go into certain countries, they require certain things, so the customer is extremely important to us. We ended up making this part of our mission at the company. We say planet, people, and pets are our mission. And the most important environment is you, starting with you and what you put in your body, which involves even the packaging around the products that you buy, or again, the clothes that you wear. So you're right. I was actually raised the same way. Don't make a political statement. You need to focus on the business. And I think that carried me pretty well throughout most of my career when I was in pharmaceutical and biotech. But at this point, being a global company and being a representative and one of the faces of the company, I have made a stance. In the United States, and you know this, when you talk about the environment, depending on which party you're talking to, it can be a very sticky issue in our country. But for me, being a mother of 4 children and understanding they're going to have children, this is something for me that I had to take a stance on. And it's very important. And I always say this isn't about global warming. This is not about that. This is about the fact that our environment has been impacted by pollution, by heavy metals, by 5G, by all kinds of things, viruses, bacteria, everything. And we have to protect our environment so that we have a world we can live in and we can be happy in. So I did have to take a political stance in a way on this specific topic, because it has to be more important to protect human mankind than any stance, in my opinion. If we're really going to do what we say we're going to do, we have to put people first.
Well, I'm a bit disappointed on this aspect in the following sense. The latest study I saw for the European Union, which is obviously one of the leaders of sustainability, on the question of whether you would pay more to travel on a sustainable flight, actually only 1 out of 3 people said I would. And we didn't even ask them how much. So it was 2 euros, 10 euros, 100 euros, right? So, I mean, we're saying everyone is, committed to sustainability, etc. But I ask each one of you, every single day, what do you do on this front? Do you wake up and turn off the lights? Do you make sure that, you take all your rubbish to the right can, etc.? This is, for me, sustainability. It starts within us and it comes out. So, yes, I think people expect industries to be sustainable. It's sort of a given now, right? For aviation, we expect it to be sustainable, and we fully commit on this, and we'll do it. However, I can't see on the other side that people are willing to put their hand in the pocket to actually spend more to be sustainable. And this is just, for me, it's an eye-opener, because when you actually ask people, are you going to pay for that? The answer is probably not, right? So that's a bit disappointing. Anyway, so I fully agree with what you said. We need to take a political stance. We need to get sustainable. The industry is and everyone, I think, is very committed to this. And I think as time passes, more and more people are saying, I actually have to be more involved, and I have to put funds and the personal time to commit to sustainability.
Do you think that, and both of you coming from different perspectives, but in a lot of ways similar, do you think the customers ultimately are going to demand that?
Sorry.
Well, he was so right what he said. Here's the problem. They demand it, but will they personally spend extra money for it? That's the issue we had. We changed all the packaging. You know, we're trying to move each step, I'm sure you all are too, towards more sustainability. But the problem is we're having to spend so much more money to do this, and the customers, that's your big issue. They don't want to spend the money. That's why I say it starts with each one of us, because you have to have every single person buy into this and not just a company. It's just like we would all love to feed the world and save the world and give everyone everything they need, but we can't do that every day. We don't have the funds to do that or the ability. So it really starts with each person. I'm not sure the customers will keep paying what they need to pay. I hope they do. We're trying to educate so people understand before we launch a product. We're raising the price because we're moving towards sustainability. But I have a very similar experience as you. The problem is people a lot of times don't want to spend extra money, so the companies are carrying the cost, and we have to stay sustainable as a company. Like, we have to be in business, right?
And you have to build. You have to
Right.
make more product. That costs money. Everything costs more money to do these initiatives.
That comes to my point about carrot and stick and incentives from the government, and also it's not only tax breaks or like funding. It could be more interesting things. For instance, in aviation, we have sustainable aviation fuel, which is the transitionary fuel to take us to 2050 to become more sustainable. The problem is one of scale, because you use arable land, and you can't create sustainable aviation fuel on arable land. Now, lots of governments, they have so much hectares of land which is not used, right? So they could put incentives to use that land by the private sector, so actually offer scalability to build this sustainable aviation fuel, make it cost effective, and thus have the private sector commit capital and actually see where the return is coming. Because I fully agree with you. We can't do it on our own. We need help, right? As each sector and its own.
Do you want to? I'll come back and.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point, what you just mentioned, and the question is excellent, because I think there are two things happening. We see the newer generations much more concerned about sustainability, about the world we're living, about the challenges that we have, about the environmental problems, and we see it every day, what is going on. At the same time, they're demanding much more from companies, that they take action, that they do things. You were mentioning about the examples that you do. We are doing many examples as well, reducing our packaging, going to 100% recycled plastic. We're doing many efforts. We also have a very good recognition. We are very happy that for the 7th time recognized as the world's most sustainable beverage company by the Dow Sustainability Jones Index. And we're very proud of that. Having said all that, there's this element of consumer behavior that we were mentioning that is also critical, because it takes money, it takes time, it takes an effort. And this is a part when we need, as part of the government support, implementing policies, but also the collaboration with the private sector that is going to be driving this change. But again, we're not alone on this. The role that the consumers play on making this happen is a lot about education and awareness. And I think we need to really understand how we can leverage that from a holistic approach, that everybody understands we're together on this. We're not going to achieve it if we are playing in silos.
Right.
Perhaps from the financial industry point of view, the client question. First remark, we passed last year the bar of the $1 trillion invested in sustainable, actually professionally defined sustainable instruments. Out of the 4.5 that we need per year to get to this transition, I think it's a good start, to get to that bar. So it means that there's a demand.
Right.
Second, we are mostly in a fiduciary duty position here, i.e. we're managing monies of others, meaning that we do not have lessons to give. And I would like to say on your political comment that politicization of sustainability is probably the biggest danger to developing further into this direction, because sustainability has nothing to do with with the political angle. It has to do with the societal angle, the view that you want to take on the world, etc. So second point. Third point, I think one of the interesting conditions of success in the financial world is that you should not arbitrage return against sustainability. So it's all a matter of being convincing. that in the long run, you're going to be better off, whether it's a corporate investing in its business model or whether it's an investor investing its pension savings into sustainable solutions, you're going to be better off, both from a return, but certainly from a risk-return adjusted point of view, if you go the route of sustainable investing. To give an example, the Lombardier Group, which you see here on the slide, has decided to go that route for now 30 years, and we've just now hired for the first time a chief nature officer. We wouldn't have done that as a bank if we were not completely convinced that investing in nature is probably going to be the next major step towards not only nature regeneration, which is so needed, but also, of course, carbon issues. So we have to develop skills. We have to make the right assumptions about the risk return that we're targeting, but certainly we should not take a political stand because our duty is a fiduciary duty.
Thank you. The next question is, we're here at Davos. World leaders, thought leaders, business leaders have converged here this week to talk about some of these major issues. And this has been one of the hot topics. ESG has been one of the topics. Also, technology has been one of the major topics. Where do you see, I want you to pull your crystal ball out for a minute and talk about what emerging technologies do you see that are going to be part of the conversation next year, the year after? What is it going to look like? What's going to enter this conversation in a couple years or next year? What new technologies are going to influence companies' policies? Do you guys have any insight into that or thoughts about what we're going to see, what we're going to be talking about, and what's going to be added to your strategy, really, or as a part of it going forward? And if whoever wants to jump in.
Okay. So I'm going to speak as a scientist.
Or what are you excited about, too?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm going to speak a little bit as a scientist instead of a businesswoman right now. I really think that the world is going to have to be educated. One of the things that the Root Brands did when we started the community is to grow it to 76 countries, and we'll be in over 80 this year, is to start a movement on the environment. So we basically have a network of people committed to the environment and to these issues. We have about, I think, 200,000 people now. It started with about 1,000, and now it's moved on, and we do weekly calls on how to make things more natural, how to make them more sustainable, how to focus on the environment, people, and animals. Again, we do focus a lot on regeneration, and I want to talk about the future, what you said that we think we'll see. I think we've got to go a little bit further than sustainability. And one of the things that has to happen in order for things to be sustainable and for this world to continue to be the wonderful, amazing environment it is when you are making things sustainable, you have to, the current things that are here, including our bodies and the world, you have to detox and clean the air, land, and water. We talk a lot about saving the soil and building trees, and it's very important for our environment. But we are going to have to focus on innovation that regenerates. We talk about AI, we talk about biohacking. While we're doing all of these great discussions on science, we have to understand if you don't clean and detox the land, air, and water and people and animals, and then also restore and regenerate, we'll never become the world that we want to become, because as viruses mutate, we have to mutate. We have to be stronger. We're the strongest species. So I really believe the world will step up, and instead of talking just about sustainability and the environment, I think we will talk about, as human beings, how we can live to be 130 years old by really helping our land, air, and water and the environment and people regenerate. And it is possible. You can bioprint an arm or a leg, but to naturally help your body is one of the main focuses of our companies, because we want people to take the natural things out and then also give back to the world. So I do think this is going to become a hot topic. I think the problem has been the innovation hasn't been there, but more and more scientists and companies are focusing on this in the world.
Well, I really like what you're saying, and I do believe this really nice tangent to take as well, has all the things that need to take place going forward, and there's so many. But I think really it's time to take some very tough decisions. One of which is, are we going to go the nuclear way? Are we going to increase our nuclear energy? Because for me, it's one of the only ways to achieve our sustainability targets in terms of having enough critical mass to be able to reach where we need to get. So tough decisions. Then cattle, right? Do we need to consume so much beef globally? I mean, it destroys the ecosystem, it destroys all of the regenerative, well, the magic word you said. And it's one of the biggest contributors of greenhouse emissions. So how do you turn that? And there's, protein, which is from other sources, which is much better actually than beef, for instance. So, it's a time for tough decisions, and then we need to invest in all of these new technologies, breakthrough technologies. With AI, for instance, we have carbon capture. We need to see how we scale this up. It's a fantastic way. How we regenerate forests, for instance. Also use financial instruments for forest regeneration. So, for instance, regulate land plots where you build technical forests, so you put trees there and there's a committed capital from investors, so on and so forth. So we need to be innovative, we need to be on the forefront of science and technology, but we also need to take very, very tough decisions and things that have been, at least in the West, taboo for many, many years.
You're going to take away my steak. Darn it. Sorry.
Yes, I think Davos brings a lot of opportunities to connect, to pause also to understand a little bit of what are the trends and what is coming up in the future and learn from others' challenges and how we are addressing those. I think in terms of technologies, there's so much and it's moving so quickly. In terms of our sector, for example, I can mention an example of how we're also leveraging a new technology by a company called Mana Drones, where it's delivering products through drones, which not only increases the time, reduces the time enormously, the speed of delivery, but also the emissions. Also in Davos, I think it's great is that all these different leaders are getting together to discuss. There's this initiative, for example, for the World Economic Forum of the CEO Climate Alliance leaders, which gathers different leaders to try to increase the speed of the journey to net zero, but not only through companies, but mainly through Scope 3, which is so critical, and shared tools, shared knowledge. How can we help? How can we really deliver on this? So I think this is an excellent space. And my final point will be, I was so impressed to see how much is going on artificial intelligence, particularly this year, and many initiatives, not only regulatory front, but also the sustainability front, AI and sustainability, climate resilience. So there's so much conversations going. It's a little bit even overwhelming to see how much it is. But it's an opportunity to really try to keep our eyes open to see what could be next in the 5-10 next years.
Most of the important things have been said, but just to add the technology view from the financial instrument point of view, I think first of all, finance looks at the world today as having enough of the technology that are needed to transform already a lot of what has to be transformed, and is not looking for additional ones in order to invest. I think there is already very interesting technology that simply need scale and, of course, additional capital to be more effective. One of the area where I think it's going to be most transformative is the interpretation and definition of or establishment of data that are needed to make the right decisions. And I think in this respect, any technology that will now develop in this field will be absolutely critical, especially in line or in view of the Scope 3 discussion that we're going to all have, i.e. my intuition in this respect is that the world in the next 3 years will have to face the issue of the value chain in a much more serious way than it has until here, i.e. any corporate will have to understand the exact nature of its value chain upstream and downstream in order to make sure that it is not being addressed negatively either by regulators or by clients. You were talking about clients, customers in doing wrong for the environment. So I think data technologies will be critical for them for that aspect.
And the use of it and the understanding of what it's telling you, right?
Exactly.
Okay, unfortunately, I have to wrap it up. I've got a dozen more questions. I could have these guys up here for another hour, but we have to move on to another program. I encourage you to stick around for that. That's going to be an enlightening conversation. Thank you, panelists. I tell you what, let's do this next year and get a report in on what the conversation is in 2025. But until then, thank you. And we've got to wrap it up. Let's get a picture before we get off stage, and then you guys please stick around.